Welcome back to another episode of the Faith Informing Podcast, the podcast where we talk about what informs our faith and how our faith forms us. My name is Travis Jamieson, and I'm your host. I'm also the pastor of Palo Alto Christian Reformed Church, as well as an author of a new book entitled The Mystery of Faith: Why the Gospel is Still Good News. I encourage you to pick up a copy of my new book, and you can find that wherever books are sold. On today's episode of the podcast, I have the pleasure of speaking with Andy Maitland. Andy is an artist and a spiritual director based in Surrey, England, which is a little bit south of London. In this episode, we talk about his art, what it means to pay attention to the subject that the artist is drawing, and how that's connected to our spiritual lives. What does it mean to pay attention to the Holy Spirit in our life? It's fantastic to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself as we get started? Where are you located, and what's your day job right now?
I'm located in a county just south of London. About half an hour on the train from London. A little town called Redhill, and I've been here for a number of years. And in terms of what do I do at the moment, I'm kind of in between projects, I would say. I'm an artist and a spiritual director, and it's kind of normal for artists to finish one project and then look back at it, I suppose just chew it over and reflect a little bit over what you did and why you did it. I mean, there are reasons for what you do and why you did it when you are in the process of doing something, but you learn something new as you look back and as you finish the project too. So I'm kind of in that place at the moment where I'm looking back at a previous project that I did in pretty much during COVID, and chewing over some of those aspects of the project. And I'm also venturing, I suppose, a bit more online and exploring the idea of offering spiritual direction a little bit more online too. So that's pretty much where I'm at the moment. So to summarize, I suppose a place of unknowing and kind of waiting, and kind of exploring, and just seeing where things go, where thoughts lead me, and so on. So
yeah, you seem very relaxed in that kind of unknowing space.
Yeah. As I say, part of that, I think, is being an artist, and you can't just sort of produce something out of nothing. And there's a difference between being a graphic designer, for example, which is part of my history, and being an artist. Being a graphic designer, you are working to a brief with particular goals in mind. And that's what you're shooting for. But with being an artist, you're stirred to create via different means, different goals, and they're sometimes elusive, and it takes a bit of a while to figure out what interests you, as to why you're making something or creating something or drawing something, and I think being an artist is, I suppose, more to do with meaning and why you create something rather than just looking at a set of goals. I mean, as an artist, you have to produce a certain amount of work that's saleable, because otherwise you won't continue being an artist or doing what you do. So there has to be a part of that, but it's the balance between producing something that people might like, but also working on the other aspects, which is to push something and to make something that really does cause people to think differently. And so I suppose that's partly why I've gotten used to being a bit more comfortable with the process of just waiting to see what stirs. And on the faith side of things, the spiritual direction, and my own beliefs as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, that's also an interesting question. I think, again, I'm becoming a bit more comfortable with waiting while the Spirit is up to things, and while He does things in your heart, while He transforms you and changes you. And I think part of that waiting is to do with becoming tired of your own answers and realizing that actually, if you get in the way or you light your own fire, so to speak, I don't know what the phrase might be, but it's kind of pointless, and of eternal insignificance, if that makes sense. It's not forming, and I think if you can produce it, then what's the point of the Spirit? If you can produce it yourself, what's the point of having faith in a God who is supernatural and actually changes people? There isn't any point. It becomes a DIY Christianity or self-help or something else, religion, for a better word. So yeah, over time I've become comfortable with those sorts of things to some degree, not completely. I wouldn't want to give the impression that I am 100% comfortable with every single thing that takes place in life. That would not be true. Part of being changed is that you go beyond yourself. So that's essentially what takes place both in art and in faith.
When did you get interested in art? Was this a thing that started as a little kid for you?
Yeah, I've always been interested in making something and creating things, and I think, as far as I can remember, that's been the case. Since I was a kid, really, since I can recall, frankly.
Yeah, because the way you're describing waiting, and kind of the elusiveness of art, it reminds me a bit of kids, like in the sense, in a good way. Like my daughter is 9 years old, and she's a real artist. She loves art. It's definitely her passion. And there doesn't ever seem to be a need to there doesn't have to be an end goal for her
Yeah,
to do art. Like she can just do art and then eventually something comes out of it. But she doesn't start always, I mean, sometimes she does, but like not always with a sense of like, this is what I'm gonna make. But she's very, I would say she has a real openness to wherever the process takes her. And I feel like that is probably common amongst children. Um, like they're less driven by monetary, ends or impressing other people. And it like just strikes me that like it's like this like in the faith, even as a Christian, there's like a maturity that comes. Like a mature person in Christ is someone I think that becomes more and more comfortable with waiting on the Holy Spirit and not trying to control everything. And so like there's and that kind of goes back to Jesus's whole let the little children come to me. Like there's something about that child faith that's actually what maturity looks like. Um, so yeah, it just really strikes me as a really important factor for all Christians and but all artists and creatives, even as a writer, I often think of it as like this waiting process and this journey with the Holy Spirit that I'm not always sure of how, like I have an idea of what I want to write about, but it takes a while for it to find its way. And that's why like I always encourage people, like you just have to get started. Like you just get going. Like it's okay if you don't know where it's going to go, because that's still being decided, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of art, uh, I think most, if not all, artists are very different, and they can pursue their practice or their approach in a particular way. I mean, I alluded to the previous piece of art that I've just finished doing, which was actually a couple of years ago. So at the end of, at the beginning of 2023, I published a book, and it was to do with something called abstraction art, abstraction drawings in particular, made on an iPad. And the whole point of creating those came about out of this experience of being in COVID and the lockdown and so on. So the reason why I'm talking about this is partly because of the process. So prior to COVID, I was making art in one particular way, or being creative in one particular way, which is to go out into a field or into a garden and look at something directly, one-to-one, with the subject. And I would spend time looking at it, and then think about how I might draw it. And then I would draw it. And if I found it interesting, I'd spend a few days, particularly landscapes or something, drawing it at sort of different lights. And flowers slightly differently, although the light catches those in particular ways too. So that's one process. You're actually drawing directly from life. And then COVID hits, and we have lockdown over here, and we aren't actually physically allowed outside the house for more than 15, 20 minutes. And particular people can, leave their house. So, for example, my other half, she's a healthcare professional, so she could, but I couldn't. And so I had to think about, well, what do I do in this instance? That there's no ending in sight as to when this lockdown might end. And so I had to think about, well, sort of what do I do? How do I carry on being creative? Do I just stop for maybe a year or a year and a half, or what do I do? And I spent a few months being pretty frustrated about it. And then I suddenly thought, actually, to cut a long story short, actually my imagination isn't bound, it's completely unbound. So I started to remember some of the things that I spent days drawing. And because you're looking at something, and you're going through a certain amount of repetition in how you're drawing things, there's a certain amount of memory stored in your mind. And therefore you can make simple lines and simple shapes that are not figurative or realistic to the actual thing that you're drawing, so flowers or landscapes, but they hold an essence of it. And they have a more of a graphical feel, which kind of harkens back to my one of my previous jobs, which is a graphic designer. So to cut a long story short, that was not a pleasant experience, but actually out of it came something rather wonderful. And so I produced a book about the experience of making these drawings. And the part of the idea was to make some drawings that actually work in an environment. So, for example, your house, or a particular room, or a particular architectural setting. The idea was that the drawings work within that area, rather like when you plant a garden, you think about, well, that particular rose or that daffodil looks particularly elegant and splendid in this particular spot. And then you'd put it there, and then you would build things around it, maybe some greenery and some other kind of shrubs that would highlight that. And you'd think about color and so on. So these pieces of art were produced in that kind of way. And the whole experience of being locked down and then having to rethink how I actually made art caused me to think about, well, actually, the previous years where I've been producing these big works that were 6 foot high and maybe sometimes 8 foot, 9 foot across, they were to do with the space that people walk into. So they were big pieces of work, sort of giant flowers, as it were, or giant landscapes. But looking back, doing the reviewing process again of the last few years before 2020, before the pandemic, I was able to understand that actually, in the process of learning and looking at other people's work, to understand and to grasp what it means to draw and how to draw, what I'd actually become aware of was that I was really interested in making pictures that impacted the person as they were in the space. So in the exhibitions I had, there would be a number of really big pictures and some smaller iPads with an animation of each of the drawings. The original drawing of each picture from beginning to end was on the iPads, and then the larger pictures were this whole thing of experiencing space as you walk into it and what it does to a person. And it's back to that idea of moving all of that into the 2020 work and thinking about abstraction drawings and how they are placed in our environment and how they work with architecture and how that impacts the human. And that suddenly became quite important over time, just by looking back, that actually I wasn't just interested in making marks or drawing. I was interested in trying to say something about what it means to be human in a space. And sometimes we only realize we're humans when we see walls or windows or greenery in front of us and we touch it and we think, oh yeah, I can feel that outside of myself. And it's kind of valuating to you too, as a human being. There's a reality touching you, as it were. And so I was playing and have been playing with that idea. So a bit of a convoluted answer to your question, but so process did change over time, but only through challenge. And it goes back to the faith and the spiritual too, that actually change takes place during extreme conditions of being uncomfortable as to where you are, your understanding of the surroundings, your understanding and sort of geography of the Christian life, who Jesus is, who God is, who the Holy Spirit is, and you're transformed by being really pushed to the edge of your grasp of those things. And sometimes it's not pleasant. It breaks you, and it hurts. But good stuff comes out of it.
Yeah. When you mentioned like these drawings were trying to get to the essence of the landscapes or the gardens that you were drawing before, it almost sounds like, and you were recalling these landscapes like you had done years before. Like it's like you tell me a bit about like the relationship you as an artist have with the subject, because it's like the way you're talking about it sounds very relational. Like you're out touching it, you're feeling your humanity, and I think that's a really profound observation.
Yeah, I mean, just as you're talking, I mean, I'm reminded of when my parents were stopping to look at a gorgeous view when I was a kid. And I would be thinking, why are we stopping to look at this? I'd quite like to get to the beach or something, or or some other thing that was of much more interest and much more fun. And I suppose at that age, those kind of things are, and you don't appreciate, the scale of a view, and you're sort of tiny little standing in it, which makes you really small, and this grandiose kind of panoramic view of imagining a landscape that goes on for miles, and over time that changed. So when I started in 2011 looking at landscapes, and that came about basically because I was on holiday Italy, in Florence, which I hadn't seen for 20 odd years. And both me and my other half, we were sat on the hill just overlooking the city. And suddenly I just picked up a pen and a bit of paper that I got from the hotel and just started trying to draw what it was in front of me. And that's the first time, because at the time I was a graphic designer, that's the first time that I started to just draw just for the sake of the enjoyment of it. And then from there, I thought, that's really interesting. I'll take a note and make a note of that whole sort of thinking and the response to what I was looking at, that whole process. So when we got home, I thought, I'm going to have a go at trying to draw on the iPad. And so I went out into the landscape and started drawing. And to start with, it was let's just say the results weren't great. But I mean, this is where you start, and it's pretty much where you start on every new project, and then you refine it and you grow into it and you develop and so on. And over time, as you said, there's a local landscape in a park nearby, and I'd go to this landscape because one, it's nearby, and I could reach it quickly at different times of the day. So I could go in the morning early, and I could go in the evening, and view the light on the trees as they hit the leaves or the tree trunk and the shadows, and so on. So it kind of did get to be a relationship, and they kind of these places. I picked, I don't know, 6 or 8 of these things, these places, and I kind of got to know them as almost as people, as almost as somebody drawing a portrait, but of a landscape rather than a person. And they all have their individual characters, and at different times of day, different seasons, they would be different too. So yeah, it is very relational, and I think that's part of why I found it so difficult during COVID, because that relationship was between me and the thing I'm directly looking at and responding to was completely cut. You know, I could have gone out and done a couple of sketches at 15 minutes, but they were the briefest of encounters with they would have been the briefest of encounters with landscapes or flowerscapes, and you would have got different results, but nothing like the spending a couple of hours looking at something. So it was pretty frustrating, but the really good stuff, really good creativity and thought and process came out of that. To the degree that I now have 2 different ways of looking at things. In fact, they bounce off each other, and yeah.
That's beautiful. I think the French philosopher Simone Weil, during her short life, she talked about the kind of, I think she would have said, like, the greatest virtue is attention, giving something or someone your full attention. And like that just sounds like the what your work is. It's like you're giving this tree or landscape or garden your complete attention. And that's like a discipline in and of itself, because that's being present with anything is a challenge. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
it is. I mean, it's a different kind of present when you're looking at something directly, and you're focused on the nuances, and you're thinking about, how do I capture the character of this, but not literally, but you know, because I'm not taking a photograph, I'm making a representation of it, even a figurative one or a realistic one. To from that to abstraction, which is different again, but abstraction has a different kind of relationship involved in that. In that, the piece of work isn't just created in itself; it's created to sit within an environment, and therefore the context is also important. And so that there's that relationship too. But there's also the relationship with the artist that kind of is making those marks that might resemble trees or flowers or petals or so on.
So, you know, as I think about your story of, you know, graphic designer to iPad artist. Um, I have to ask a little bit more about the iPad because I'm here in Palo Alto, the Steve Jobs's home. He is buried in the cemetery next to our church,
Wow.
and so, the Steve Jobs aura is among us in this place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
Wow.
yeah, so we have people at my church that work at Apple, and it's Apple is has a huge presence here in Silicon Valley. Um, so why why the iPad? Like when you were sitting in Florence, you were writing on a piece, drawing on a piece of paper, and then you went home and you're like, let's try it on the iPad. That doesn't seem to me to be the first like what I would naturally go to. So what was it that drew you
Mm.
to the iPad?
There are a number of reasons. I think because I came from a graphic design background, I was used to working um, uh, on screen and moving things around and trying different colors out and layouts and fonts
Mm,
and that kind of thing. That's one reason. The other, I suppose, fairly major reason is um, because it's instantaneous. And you don't have to take an easel out to a field or a garden. You can flick the thing on and immediately get a few lines down and capture what it is you're looking at. But I think for me that the most important reason for picking the iPad, those two things are important, but the most important thing for me was um, I would like to try and make a different kind of mark. Um, uh, I don't just want to produce something that's been done before. And uh, so that's partly the reason why I did it. And yeah, the spontaneity and the immediacy of it, I rather like too.
mm,
You can really respond to something within minutes and get something down very rapidly. So, for example, a sunrise or um, uh, I suppose you could even draw in the dark if you wanted to, a moonscape or whatever. In fact, I think a gentleman by the name of David Hockney, who's an English artist,
mm,
I think he was the original artist to actually draw, significant artist to draw on an iPad. And in fact, in the early days when I came back from Florence, um, when I was pretty much decided that I was going to draw and have a go at drawing on the iPad and developing something, I Googled iPad art or iPad artist or something like that. And
mm.
his name came up. And he was actually having an exhibition just a couple of months later in 2012, which I went to a couple of times and was hugely impacted by. So, uh, yeah. But that's the reason why I chose the iPad. It has all sorts of um, benefits going for it, but I think the main one for me is the kind of mark it makes. Very graphical and very bold. Um, Basically, the app that I use is called Brushes XP, and there's no subtlety in it. It's extremely bold, which causes you again as an artist to think, okay, I have to deal with this. How do I work with this? And you gradually work into it. And it's like, I suppose, any kind of medium. If you expect an iPad to behave like a pencil, um, then you're mimicking the old pencil
Mm.
in a digital medium, which to me makes no sense. Or if you prefer watercolor, um, and you find some sort of watercolor app, again that makes no sense to me. You would, in my personal view, you would pick the iPad as a medium in itself, and you would create using that medium, which is pretty much what I was excited about.
Yeah, it's like you have to choose to live within the limits of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you would choose it for for the reasons it for the qualities it has,
Hmm.
and of course it has quality. It doesn't have qualities for example, as pencil or watercolor, but it has other qualities that are just as brilliant. Mm-hmm. So, if not more so, from my point of view, I absolutely love it. And I don't draw in any other means. I just draw using the iPad, and I had to learn over the years to do it, and then learned how to draw. Yeah, it takes a bit of a while, but it's fun.
Do you think the spontaneity of it, like that you can just pop it open and like click on and start going, did that help you to get into drawing? Because it doesn't sound like there's not many barriers to getting started. Like you don't have to like pack your car with all your art supplies.
Yeah.
Which for some people that would be enough to be like, you know what, never mind, I'm not going to do it. But this seems like it's like, hey, it's right there, so there's nothing to stop you from doing it. Was that
I think it's back to that relationship again. You're looking at something, you're creatively responding to it, and there's no time limit between your response and looking at it, with setting up all this other technical gear. You literally are flick the button, swipe, and away you go. Yeah, I mean, it's that immediate. Within seconds, you can make marks as to what you're looking at and capture things rapidly. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I suppose pencil or pen is closely, maybe more immediate by seconds. But yeah, the immediacy is pretty amazing, and also the fact that you can carry it in a small bag.
Yes.
And you can just go, one person, just one bag, and away you go. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, really quite an amazing thing to have created, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How have you seen the technology change since you started? Because, iPads are kind of, they're coming out with newer versions every year. But when I look at like the original iPads versus today, although there are like some physical differences, the same idea is there. So how have you experienced the advancements in the technology?
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I think essentially the iPad has remained true to its invention, its origins. Steve, you mentioned the man, quite an extraordinary man, and a bit of a visionary. I think the father of the digital age, as it were. Yeah, I think there was one time where I thought, I think Apple started off producing an iPad about 12 inches or something, or 9 inches. And I thought, do you know what? It would be great to have a larger one to make a bigger drawing with. And I kind of got around that by actually just producing a bigger drawing by virtually expanding the canvas. So if I drew one picture here, I draw another iPad canvas here and another one there. So you had three iPad canvases together, which together made up a bigger image. So that was kind of fun to do too.
Like you would have three different iPads.
No, I would have just the one, or possibly two, and I would either draw one particular picture, finish that, and then I would draw so if I'm looking at a landscape in front of me, I'd draw the left-hand side, the center section, and then the right-hand section, all on the one iPad, but just different canvases, and then combine them together at the end. And on occasion, I'd use two iPads possibly. So even though I wished for a larger iPad, which it eventually came, I found that actually the smaller iPad suited me much better for a number of different reasons. And I think it's back to that thing again of what a particular artist may or may not like, and the size of paper that people like to draw on. And for me, I found that the slightly smaller one suited my kind of style. So I'm pretty much using the same size. Yes, the iPads have been updated over periods of time, and they're faster, more responsive in technology, which is good too. The pixel size is, I think, the biggest jump in in technology, meaning you can produce a larger canvas at a higher quality. But there are various things you can do to get around that, which I won't go into.
You're not going to tell us all your secrets.
No, no.
So how did you, from artist to spiritual director, like when did the spiritual director journey start, and what led to that?
That was way back in 2002.
Okay.
I'm going to cut a long story short.
Sure.
It was a pretty traumatic time, and I was going from one job to another. And I kind of thought, this is the direction I'm being led in. And actually, it ended up completely different. And in the process, I think you've heard of the phrase dark night of the soul, being broken, that kind of thing. In the process of that transition of going from one job to another, that's what I experienced. And during that period, I think it was only one other time in my life where I've experienced something similar, although I've only been able to make sense of it since that time. But during that time, I read a book by a gentleman called Dr. Larry Crabb. And in fact, I read, I think it was 2 or 3 of his books, and one in particular. And at the end of it, there's a little invitation to something called a spiritual direction school in Colorado. And because of the book, seemed to pretty much put its finger on where I was in my walk with God, and basically my pastor at my church and the close friends around me weren't able to really help with the situation I was in. No disrespect to them or the pastor, so having read this book, it felt as though, it seemed as though there was an answer in this book. I mean, I don't tend to read a lot of books. I tend to go where my nose leads me, or where I'm prompted in my interests as an artist. So generally, I'll have an interest, and then I'll kind of pursue that in sort of a very organic way. And likewise with my faith. And this kind of led to this book. Read it. At the back, there's this invitation. So I apply for this invitation to go to Colorado and spend some time in this school. I've had some interest in pastoral care and that kind of thing for pretty much all my life. So there was that aspect of it too that interested me. So it wasn't pastoral care, it wasn't counselling, it was something else called spiritual direction, which I hadn't come across. So there was a little bit of interest in that, but frankly, not a lot. I was more interested in, I suppose, bluntly finding out what God was doing to me, because that's what it felt. It felt like in my life. I'm summarizing this pretty quickly. So I headed off to Colorado and had this experience with this particular Dr. Larry Crabb amongst 30 other people on this particular course. And I then returned again in subsequent years, and then a little bit later in 2006. So that's how I came about spiritual direction. I wasn't really looking for it. I was looking to find out what God was up to in my life. And that experience in America profoundly changed frankly, me. It was formative hard to put into words really, but significant. And from that point on, interest in spiritual direction after 2006 kind of grew. So that's how I got into spiritual direction, accidentally, I suppose, or on purpose, led by the Spirit.
Yeah. Could you you mentioned biblical counseling, I think, pastoral care, and spiritual direction. Can you define what is spiritual direction uh, in the way you understand it?
Yeah. I think the way that I understand it is that it's being transformed into being like Christ, not managing our own lives or how we deal with circumstances or situation or our behaviors or um, uh, that sort of thing. It is particularly responding. I mean, spiritual direction is it's an interesting term. Direction's kind of not very nice because it implies you directing somebody's life. That's not the case. It's the Spirit and His direction in somebody's life. So the kind of clue is partly in the name. It's to do with the Spirit and it's to do with spiritual formation, which He is up to. Not humans, not people. Although He works in and through humans, not using us, but delighting to work in and through us as His creation.
Yeah.
So I think in its simplest form, that's what I would say, that it's an interior work of the Spirit to transform us into who Christ, the likeness of Christ, if that makes sense.
And
so
it's helpful to have, like, if an individual were thinking about, I want to grow in my relationship with Christ. I want to be more Christ-like. Reaching out to someone who is a spiritual director, who does spiritual direction. What's that person's role in their life?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Say that.
Like what is the spiritual director's role in the directee's life? Like what's the purpose of that?
I think it's to be, I suppose, to be frank, there's no expert of the. I think I've written this on my own Substack. There isn't an expert in of the soul. I am, as a spiritual director, I am not an expert in understanding the soul and so on. So I am very much a part of the relationship of two people coming before God and being transformed by the same Spirit. He transforms us both, and the experience of the directee is to be served by the director, who is listening, observing, waiting, all those things as to what the Spirit is up to, and it's in the stories or the story of a person's life, just everyday things. So, for example, I might be having a bit of a difficult relationship with my wife or something, or somebody at work, or I just feel niggled about I don't know, just my pastor or something. Or it can be something as small as that, and it could be all the way up to I'm experiencing a loss of a loved one, and I don't frankly know how to navigate and deal with life at the moment. So I'm not providing answers. I'm looking to see where the Spirit is up to in somebody's life, and how He's drawing them closer to Himself, and also in that same process transforming that person into more the likeness of Christ, which is it's pretty incredible to be a part of that. But he is, the Spirit of God is doing what He does, and He is. I think it would be wrong to assume of every spiritual director in every conversation to assume that they are always to be a part of a conversation. I think it was St. John of the Cross that said, listen to somebody, and if you are invited to participate in that transformation, then great, go ahead. And if you're not, leave well alone. And it doesn't mean that the person that you're talking to is left out. It just possibly means that somebody else or another relationship is where the Spirit is taking that particular person. But it's very much the Spirit doing His work in a person, and you become aware of some of the things that humans do. I think I alluded back to 2002. I summarised that was a very difficult situation for myself. Frankly, I was putting my job before God. But as a reasonably seasoned Christian at the time, I wasn't able to see that. And I mean, this is the other thing about Christians. All of us have blind spots. We all start with a fallen nature, and the Spirit is working in each one of us. And the grace to see that and to be a part of that is His doing. So, yeah, I mean, I've lost my train of thought, but
oh, that's really helpful.
So yeah, I was going to say, going back to so you understand part of the flesh dynamic. I think it's called, whereby you're a particular person. So, for example, myself, I may have been seeking God in 2002 and saying, "Well, hey, why haven't I got an answer to my prayers about my job?" And a wiser person may have said, "Well, actually, He doesn't want to give you an answer to your job. He wants to give you an answer that's bigger than that. He wants to give you Himself, and He wants to move you into a deeper relationship with Himself, and He wants to move you out of needing a job, or insert whatever you like there, into that space, a particular kind of relationship, something to get fixed. You don't need that, and He's detaching you from that and attaching you to what the Spirit is up to in your life. And that's an internal work, and it takes some particular kind of time. And we're all unique, so there isn't a sort of a blueprint or a set of, sort of stages that you can look at to apply this to people. My life is completely different to yours. I'm an artist and you're a pastor. Your relationships are completely different to mine. And therefore, what God does in you and how He transforms you is totally unique to you, and so on. So I'm not entirely sure that's really clear, but anyway.
No, that's really helpful. It really, for me, in my mind, is connecting back to your work as an artist and the relationship with the subject you are painting. That is, as a spiritual director, you are also giving that full attention to this person,
Yeah.
but particularly to the Spirit. And I think as Christians, the Spirit is doing a unique work in all of us. But one of the universal things we all must do is give that full attention to the Spirit, because He's there and He wants to do something more in us. And like you said, give us Himself.
Yeah.
And I do think that a lot of our problems as human beings is we don't pay attention to God. And I think what a great, I don't know, I'm just really thinking like the work of art and practicing the art of paying attention and really delving into a subject seems to me to be really organically connected to like the work of the faith and like paying attention to who God is in your life. So
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah. I mean, just a quick response on that. I think that the whole idea, I mean, my Substack, I've called it the Ministry of Imagination. And it kind of straddles those two things that you talked about. A pretty wise lady asked me, I mean, as spiritual directors, you have to have your own spiritual director. It kind of makes sense because you're being transformed too. Not that I think, I mean, this is the other thing that I was really, I loved about Larry Crabb, that he was keen to unprofessionalize the kind of ministry of well, I'm calling it spiritual direction, but to deprofessionalize that and actually to build that or to move that into church, so that actually people were, as you were saying, were attentive to what God's up to in one another's lives, which is kind of body ministry, which is kind of church, which is interlinked with love, interlinked with God's character as to who he is. He's Trinity. Therefore, we are part of that relationship. And also we are called to relate like he does, not just sort of trying to mimic what he does, but actually being transformed into the love that he has for the Spirit for Jesus, and so on. The reciprocal love amongst those three, amongst us in the church, in the body, and also amongst those people. Say, for example, you're going out to work or whatever, amongst those people that you're meeting in the workplace, and so on. But there was another thought that actually I picked up just as you were talking, which I'm trying to recall. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Yeah, no, but it's and even like your comment about when you go out to draw, you got to catch the landscape in different light because you see it different ways. And with people in the Christian walk journey, you got to be with them in different light. Like there's the light of suffering, there's the light of, you might be with someone after they lose a loved one, and then you might be with someone when their daughter gets married. And it's a different, you're seeing everything in different light. And then you're going to see the vast arrays of the ways that God is at work in their life.
Yes.
So I just think that metaphor of kind of the artist for the spiritual life has a lot of legs there. I just feel like it could, there's so many connections for me.
Yeah, and I'm partly, personally, I'm partly exploring that with this idea of ministry of imagination. But I don't necessarily see it limited to just art or spiritual direction. I think it has in spiritual direction. There's this. I think it's in Galatians where Paul's talking about he's again in the pain of childbirth while he's looking at the Galatians. I think I've written about this on my own Substack, that he has a vision for them, that he has an idea of where it is that God is taking these people, that he is, yes, Paul is the person with the intellect, with the experience of God and so on, but actually he's living and sharing his life with them, not to the degree that he's the expert. He is just one of them. And he is sharing that experience of I have this hope and this vision for you, that you would that Christ would be evident in your lives. And I've forgotten the exact phrasing; it's just left my brain. Until Christ is formed in you. And he has this vision for those individuals, and I think again I write about this. I think the same spirit that Paul was following has a vision for us as to how we are to be formed in Christ's likeness. So specifically for you, where you are in your geographical setting, and likewise with me. And there'll be some similarities, but it'll be totally unique as well, because you're totally unique. You're a one-off, as I am, and where God is at work in your area and in you, and what he's up to in your situation is totally different to mine. So I'm still trying to remember what it is I was trying to say earlier, which is a real frustration. But anyway, it's just one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. We'll get it next time because we're up on our time here. So, Andy, thank you for this conversation. What a delight. It's great to get to know you a bit, and I just really enjoyed hearing about your journey and just so much wisdom in your work as an artist and a spiritual director, and excited to read more on your Substack and just hear more about this stuff that you're working out right now. It's wonderful to see how God is at work in your life right now. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Faith Informing Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, like and subscribe and pass it on to a friend. We want more people to know about these great conversations.